Hi, everybody. Oh, so warm. How about a round of applause for this conference? Oh, so great. How many people here are not designers? So developers, product folks, writers, anybody who doesn't identify as a designer. Okay, there's a good number of you all in here. As a designer, on behalf of the designers that I work with on my teams and my clients, I have to admit something to you. We're scared. We need your help. See, we're scared of this design system thing. I mean, it has the word design in it, just like Amelie was describing, and we took the bait. Right? Must be good for us. But then we started to learn more about them. Take a look at any good design system. This is Atlassian's design system. I know there's some folks from Atlassian here, right? It's a great design system, and this is probably the meat of any good design system. It's a component detail page. And in this case, it's kind of a simple button here. If we take a look at the stuff on this page, the top bit has got words like NPM and yarn, right? Those aren't words for us. Those aren't words for designers. The next piece here, okay. We've got over here the change log. Okay, that's not a designer word either. What about this? Okay, this is better. Buttons are used as triggers for actions. They're used in forms, toolbars, dialogues, footers, right? These are design words, but this is really basic design knowledge. So maybe this isn't for us either. Maybe these are for other designers, but not necessarily for the ones in this room. We scroll down further. We've got now words like string and Boolean, and again, button props. These are not words for us. You get the idea. This isn't for us. And what we realized really quickly, is probably obvious to all of you here, is that design systems are for developers. And we're cool with that, right? After all, it's our job to make things for other people. That's the gig. And if we can make something for our coworkers and for our peers, that's even better. We're happy to do that. We also get why it's necessary too, right? At most startups or product companies, there's only a few of us, and very quickly we get bombarded with all these requests, more than we can generally handle on our own. And lots of organizations maintain a ratio of about 1 designer to maybe about 8 engineers or developers, which is usually just enough work to stress us the heck out. And sure, there's a wide range for how this ratio plays out. At Netflix, they do a little bit better. It's got kind of 1 to 3 last time I checked. USAA does a little bit worse. They got 1 designer to about 20 engineers. And perhaps the worst one that I've heard was when I worked with ExxonMobil 2 years ago. We helped them build their enterprise design system, Unity. They had 1 designer and 500 developers. Yikes. That designer's name is Chris O'Brien. Bless his heart. He was a dear. He was so good to work with. All right, so it makes sense that in order to field all the requests that come at us, the people themselves, the designers, we don't scale. Right? That's a harder way to scale. So instead, what we do is, instead of trying to scale the designers, if we take the ideas and the knowledge that designers possess, we extract them, and we put them in a place that's more central, that knowledge would have more efficacy and more applicability. Right? We know that has some great side effects that benefit us too. Right? For one, a lot of those inundating requests get handled by the design system itself. But what if it works? Like, what if the design system is good? What if it's too good? What if it serves everyone's needs? What if we make a great design system and they don't need us anymore? We're scared. A lot of the designers on the teams that I work with, we see this as an inevitability, right? And so if this is where it's headed, no thank you. I don't want to work on a design system. And that's the plight of a lot of the designers on the teams that I work with. On the surface, pretty gung-ho about it, but really worried about this. And so knowing that, how do we, the people in this room, how do we build design system cultures that won't replace designers, but instead will embrace designers? So for this talk, I want to share a couple of stories of things that I found to be helpful in answering questions like these. So firstly, where does design fit within a design system? And very closely related, where do designers fit within a design system? And in order to figure these two things out, let's talk about where design fits anywhere. And this ties really nicely, I think, into what Amelie was mentioning this morning, was like, we don't even know what to say about the word design. We have this stupid debate about capital D design versus lowercase d design. Right? Like, we can't even agree on that. Okay, so let's try to make a distinction here, at least for the purposes of this talk. When we talk about lowercase d design, generally I think we're talking about action and output. Right? We're talking about the artifact that we make. I sit at my desk with Sketch open or Studio open, and I design, lowercase d design, and when I'm finished, I have a design, lowercase d design. Now, I'm not sure why this is the case, but lowercase d design has gotten a pretty bad reputation lately, and so it has like a lower order connotation. And so we'll come back to this a little bit later to talk about where does this lowercase d design actually have value. Now, capital D design, however, has gotten way more attention. I think a lot of that is due to the Apples and the Googles of the world talking about design as one of the contributors to their success. So this capital D design often refers to really just making considered and intentional decisions. Right? This is the kind of design that has the proverbial seat at the table. It refers to the way that we capital D design a rollout plan, or capital D design the way you're supposed to make your way through a museum, or capital D design the corporate org chart in 5 years. And so, because capital D design is more sought after, we designers, we reject lowercase d design, and we instead go, we're going to do the capital D design. Now, the problem with that, though, is that we're not as good at it. We're just not practiced enough. And we'll get there over time, but as of right now, it's an immature skill for us. But designers, the good news is that we can work on this, right? We can improve. Let's start at the beginning, the place where many of our trials begin. So maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your manager, maybe it's your coworkers, maybe it's you that one day gets to the point and says, let's make a design system. Start cranking out some components, everybody. All right, that's already a bad start. And in order to explain why, I want to play a little game, and I'm going to call this game to be called Name That Design System. All right, I'm going to go over some ground rules here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a component. I'll pull that up on screen, and I'd like you to tell me what design system it comes from. It's kind of similar to what Nathan was doing yesterday. Maybe a little bit more difficult in some places, maybe a little bit easier in some places. Does that make sense? Everybody good with that? All right, let's try one together just to get the hang of it. So the component here on screen is a floating action button component. Anybody know what design system this is from? Just shout it out. Material design, you got it. It's from Material Design, which is a great design system. And because all of you did a great job guessing, and it's holiday season, I brought gifts for everybody. Cars. Yikes. Tesla, oh my gosh. I mean, I brought lollipops. All right, so what we've got here is actually on the ends here, we've got bags of lollipops. Just take one, and we're going to pass it around. I'm standing between you and lunchtime, so, have a little snack, get a little sugar before. So we'll kind of pass that around, take one or two or however many you want. Geez, all it takes to get a round of applause is lollipops, okay? All right, everybody get the idea? So we're going to do now individual prizes for people who get this right. Okay, so we're going to start this for real. Here we go. This is a checkboxes component. Oh, look at that. Gov.uk design system. Well done. Round of applause. I did not expect that to be guessed so soon. So actually, what you get is, come up here and claim your prize. There's a prize here. This prize is a Five Below gift card. Five Below is a chain of discount stores. They have kitschy items, mostly for about $5. So that is a $4 gift card to Five Below. Enjoy almost getting something with that. All right, on to the next one. Everybody ready? All right. This is called the Run Progress component. Anybody know what design system this is from? Who said Future Learn? Future Learn, that is correct. Round of applause. Nice work. All right, what you get, I'm going to come claim your prize here. It is in a very shiny gold bag here. And what you have earned is a cosmetic face mask. There's 5 of them in the box. It is made of 24-karat gold. I kid you not. Enjoy your relaxation. I got a thumbs up. I'll get it later. All right. All right, here we go. We'll do one or two more. How about this typographic heading scale? Anybody know what design system this is from? It's getting a little tougher. Typekit, no. Anybody? Medium, no. Good guesses. Solid, who said Solid? All right, this is BuzzFeed's design system, Solid. All right, round of applause for that answer. Let's see. It's getting real now. So this is your gift in a green bag here. What you have in the green bag is a $50 bill and a $2 bill. Enjoy your $52. All right, last one. It's going to be a tough one, but this is the best prize. I'm going to show you what we're playing for here. And actually, somebody guessed out Tesla. This is the actual prize that we're going to be playing for. All right. Amelie is ready. Like she's standing. All right, here we go. Last one. Here it is. This button component. Anybody know where this is from? Every design system. That is technically correct, but I don't know if I can award that. Bootstrap? No. It's a good guess. Lightning. All right, round of applause for Lightning. This is from the Lightning design system. All right, and yes, this is your prize here. I'm going to put it here, right here. Oh, sorry, the text got a little bit clipped. It is a Tesla Model X model. It comes in a nice little box there for easy transport. All right, let's have a round of applause for all of our contestants. Good work, everybody. For those of you that are not content with just a lollipop and didn't win one of your prizes, I got stickers up here too, so feel free to come up and get those later on. All right, so that's a little bit silly, but why do we do this? What was the point of all that? Well, if we look at a button like this, there's a reason that looking at a button in isolation, I mean, Nathan gave a great answer. Every design system ever, right? That's where that button is from. It's really difficult to identify. And even if we can identify it, it doesn't tell us much anyway. Jasenia referenced this book yesterday. It's a great book, Donella Meadows' Thinking in Systems, And in the book, she explains, she says the behavior of a system can't be known just by knowing the elements of which a system is made. It's just too abstract that way. And yet I see so many teams start this way. They go, let's make a design system. Let's start cranking out some components, right? After all, isn't that what a design system is? Well, that's pretty silly, right? Jasenia yesterday in her talk, she really nailed it. She said elements are the most visible part of a design system, so they get the most attention. Purpose is hardest to notice, but it is the most critical. So it's deceiving, but this, let's make a design system, it's not really a complete sentence. It's missing something critical there. Speaking of language, that one little preposition at the end of it makes a massive difference. Let's make a design system for, right? What's the purpose of our design system? Let's make a design system for financial services, right? That's really different than let's make a design system for publishers. That's really different than let's make a design system for TV interfaces, right? You get the idea. Very few design systems, if any, need to cater to all types of products, every product out there. And we'll revisit a few of those that could be exceptions in just a few minutes. But most design systems would really benefit from having a specific focus, a specific purpose. Emmett Connolly, who's the director of product design at Intercom, he wrote a great post called The Full Stack Design System. Actually, Emmett, any chance Emmett is here? Are you here? It's worth a shot. Okay. It's a great article. And in the article, he proposes that what makes for a full stack design system is a conceptual model of your specific product. So he gives some examples, right? Here are some examples of a conceptual model. Facebook has objects in their product that he terms, friend, post, message, event, those kinds of things. Airbnb has listing, host, guest, trip, experience. Right? Those are the objects that comprise that product. And so the design system should represent that product, or those objects, in a very specific way. And what I hope seems obvious through this is that a design system for Facebook would not work to build a product for Airbnb. Nor should it. It would be an awkward fit at best. I'm going to double down on something that Sarah said yesterday in her talk. She said, stop using material as your motion design language. And I'm going to carry that forward, and I'm going to say, stop using material as your UI design language. Right now, I've been really vocal in the past about certain tools and technologies because I think they encourage poor practices for the way that we do work for our industry. But that's not how I feel about material design. I want to be clear about that. I think material is great. I think it's well crafted. A lot of my clients start with material design as a way to get their design systems off the ground. I think that's awesome. Material is a great tool for making Google products. Right? To me, it's like Bootstrap. Right? It's a great starter kit. But you know how so many Bootstrap sites just still feel like Bootstrap? No matter how much you customize them, they still feel like Bootstrap. Now, right after lunch, Michelle and Yasmin are up, and they're going to talk about material theming, so it's very possible that I'll change my tune after that talk. I'll eat some of these words. But one thing that I've learned in working with designers and developers over the years is that the more beautiful the default is, the less likely we are to change it. So how do you make your design system specifically suited for your purposes, your organization's objects? How do you do that? Well, here's one way. It could come directly from the mission of your organization. One of my favorite exercises to do with a new client is I do an exercise called the onlyness statement. And it's kind of like a Mad Lib style worksheet. Right? So it goes like this. It says, this is the only blank that blank for blank who want to blank during a blank. That's not really useful until you see it in context. I wrote an article about this, so you can check that article out if you want a reference of this. The example that they give here is for Harley-Davidson. Right? Harley-Davidson is the only motorcycle manufacturer that makes big, loud motorcycles for macho guys and macho wannabes, mostly in the United States, who want to join a gang of cowboys during a time of decreasing personal freedom. Perfect. It's so dead on. It's so good. And one thing I love about a good onlyness statement is that, first of all, it can't work with somebody else. You couldn't apply this to Harley-Davidson's competitors. You couldn't say that this is true for Kawasaki. You couldn't say that this is true for any other motorcycle company. It is true only for Harley-Davidson. That's why it's the onlyness statement. Also, every good onlyness statement should give you jumping off points for art direction, right? With words like macho and loud and cowboys. I don't think the design system's gonna have like really delicate script typefaces in it, right? There's probably gonna be like bold sans serifs and dark colors and texture and things like that. Now I'm stereotyping a bit, but it gives you some jumping off points to explore, right? Our Harley-Davidson design system is not gonna work for, say, Sephora, and that's a good thing. Okay, another thing that you can do to make your design system distinct is to write principles that are going to guide you when you're in these points of confusion. When you're not sure what to do next, you can consult your principles. Now, most design systems have principles. I think a lot of us are probably used to that. But many teams don't realize that there are actually multiple types of principles, not just one. The first one is the most obvious one, right? Universal principles. Universal principles, they apply to basic human behavior, and they can be used for all sorts of different design. Right? Here are good examples of universal principles. Accessible. Simple, right? Those words can apply to the design system that you're making, but it also applies to all other design systems as well. That's cool, that's great. I can't think of a design system that people would be like, no, we want ours to be inaccessible and complicated, right? These are great universal principles. Where I see most teams get tripped up, though, is that they forget that you could also have specific principles, right? Not just universal principles. These usually get overlooked. These are two examples from TiVo's design system, TiVo's design principles. They're funny, they're irreverent, right? It's TV, stupid. That's one of their principles. It's video, damn it, right? That's one of their design principles. They're funny, they're irreverent, they're just like the brand. And best of all, they work perfectly for TiVo and terribly for any other company. And that's what good principles should do. They should help you decide what to focus on, and they should also help you decide what to ignore, what not to do. In their book, Rework, the Basecamp founders, Jason Fried and David Hannemeyer Hansen, they describe how they keep their software, Basecamp, really focused by way of analogy. So they say, you don't make a museum by putting all the art in the world into a single room. That's called a warehouse. What makes a great museum great is the stuff that's not on the walls. There's a lot more off the walls than on the walls. It's the stuff that you leave out that matters. Look for things to remove, simplify, and streamline. Stick to what is truly essential. About 6 months ago, I started doing some research into what makes design systems different from one another. And so I inventoried just a handful of design systems to see what components they had in common. Now, I know this slide is impossible to read, but it's not actually designed for you to read it. It's actually designed for you to kind of squint at it and kind of get the gestalt of this. Right? And I think there's a lot that we could learn at this level, like not actually having the details, but kind of seeing this from a bird's eye view. So what we've got here is kind of along the bottom axis, we've got common components. So all these things that look vertical, those are things like buttons and headings and navigations and tables and forms and things like that. And then over here on the left side, I just have abbreviations for some of the design systems that I've inventoried. So from top to bottom, we've got Shopify on the first row, then FutureLearn, then QuickBooks, then Atlassian, then US Design Standards, Lightning, and then IBM's Carbon. And so let's take a look at what we could learn in a view like this. Maybe the most obvious one. So take a look at this line in yellow here. It's a bit faint. This is Lightning Design System. And we could see that Lightning Design System has the most dots filled in of all of the ones on there. And this is certainly not comprehensive, but this is just an example to show you. And what that tells us at this view is that Lightning is one of the most thorough design systems out there, which makes sense, at least in terms of the quantity of components. It's not on this chart, but I would imagine that material design would probably be along the same lines as well in terms of coverage. But here's where it gets more interesting, I think. Let's look at the ones that have less coverage, and let's try to infer why they have less coverage. So let's take a look at future learn here. It's on the second row. Not everything is filled in, which says that they're probably not trying to win the award for most components. So what are some of the boxes that are filled in? Well, there's this component. This is called the learner stat component. There's this signpost component. This is a quiz progress component. And this is a course promo link. Now, just from the names and just from looking at these 4 comments, even if you didn't know anything about Future Learn, you could infer that their products have something to do with courses and learning and career paths and things like that, and education, right? You should be able to look at a set of components in your design system and maybe at a high level, at a bird's eye view, be able to squint at it and say, I think I know what this company's about. I think I know what products they make. And we just learned that from a bird's eye view, right? Just from looking at this level. What's equally interesting is also the stuff that's not filled in. So if we jump down one row to QuickBooks, there are these gaps here, right? Components that don't exist within that design system. So if we jump down to this, what it doesn't have are things like, the things that are in the gaps here are promos and billboards and heroes, typically things that we find in very marketing-heavy design systems. So we might infer that the QuickBooks design system is actually optimized more for transactions than marketing. They don't do a lot of marketing within their design system. That's a really useful perspective to have, both for their team as well as anybody that might want to use this. To be able to say, if I'm trying to build something transactional, that might be good for me. If I'm trying to build something marketing-y, I might have to hack that design system to get it to do that. So earlier I suggested that this is not a good place to start. Right? Let's make a design system. Cool, make some components. Instead, if we change it slightly, rephrase it a little bit, we could provide some good opportunities. What components should we start with? And maybe equally good, too, is what components do we need in this design system? Right? Slightly rephrasing it gives us some good opportunities. And this is where we switch from uppercase D design to lowercase d design. Right? We've done the work already of making considered decisions. Maybe we wrote some good universal and specific principles. Those are all capital D design tasks. And we understand a design system's purpose. That's a capital D design task. Now it's time to do what we know how to do really well, what we're practiced at. Action, output. Namely, let's design some screens, lowercase d design. Let's get into the weeds of this thing. And I tend to call these things pilots. Right? I think of it like a pilot of a TV show. It's just a standalone piece, and it's designed to be a proof of concept. Right? And the question to answer when you're considering pilots is, what kind of things do we want to be able to make with our design system? And the answer shouldn't be everything, right? Like, unless you're maybe material design, unless you're bootstrap, if you're probably not catering to everyone. There's probably a subset of a primary audience. Adekunle mentioned this the other day. There's probably a primary audience that you want to serve, that you want to make sure you're serving. So we came up with some criteria for what makes for a good pilot. I won't go over these specifically. I wrote a blog post on this. If you Google, Dan Mall pilot scorecard, you'll find it. But this is an example of how you might evaluate whether something makes a good pilot. You've got stuff like, does this pilot have a potential for common components, right up there? Or does this have a potential for common patterns? Or is there an available champion on this project who, after it's done, will sing its praises as part of the design system and evangelize the design system for you? And once you have your own criteria, what you can do is you can make a scorecard. Right? And you can evaluate every product that you have to say, what product is going to be a good pilot? And you could make some distinction. This is going to vary from company to company to say, all right, we're going to do, over the next 6 months, we're going to tackle the top 3 pilots or the top 5 pilots, the ones that scored the highest. Right? And you can create a roadmap of these, a prioritization chart. And we helped ExxonMobil to create their design system. This was one of our pilots. This was a complete app that they have. It's built in SharePoint. This is their agenda creator product, right? So this is like, we got to have a meeting. We need different people to present. So they make agendas in this tool. It's not very good. It's not very well designed. It's hard to use. That's one of the things that we found in our research. So we did research in this pilot. We did, like any good project, we did stakeholder research, we did customer research, and we understood what needs to be there and what doesn't need to be there. And we came up with something that was like this, much simpler, a much more modern version. This is their new agenda creator product. And once we were done with this, right, we made the screens. We made it desktop and mobile, and however you want to do it, mobile first or desktop first or at the same time, whatever your design process is, you follow that and make products, right? Don't make design system components, make products. And once we were done with the product, then we looked at it and went, what bits could we extract from that now that other ExxonMobil teams could use, right? Because design system components should be extracted from real products, not made in isolation. So the header, for example, right? The nice thing is that we said, all right, other teams could maybe use that header. Not all teams could use that header, at least not yet, but all right, let's start there. The nice thing is that the next team gets the benefit of all the good thinking that at least went into these headers. They're responsive, they have all the right typefaces, they got the brand colors, they're tested for accessibility, they're QA'd, right? They're pulled straight out of a product and ready for other people to use where applicable. And notice what we didn't do is we didn't start abstractly. We didn't say, let's make a header, because then we would just be guessing as to what the requirements of the header would be. And you overbuild the header. You over-design the header because it has to support everything. If you start with a real product, it only needs to support the things that that product needs to support. Then we moved on to the next product. Right? So this is their product this is a kind of an identity manager, an access management tool. And what we realized is, okay, we could probably use the same header from that previous product with a few tweaks, of course. So this is the next product that we helped them make. This is their new identity management system. And you'll see here that the header is similar, but we needed a few more pieces. We needed some extended navigation. We needed more links. We needed a search bar. Right? So eventually, after working on 4 or 5 or 6 pilots, we start to create about 4 or 5 variations of this, or maybe about 2 or 3 variations of this header, right? Things like, okay, we might need some drop-down menus on some of those. We might need search on some of those. We might need a kind of a utility navigation on some of those. And then some variations are we actually might not need any of those things. So a much simpler and slimmer version. And each of these was easy to create because it came from a previously tested version. And it was also easy to create because we had real products that had real requirements. We weren't guessing at potentially what future these components would have. We were actually building for the present. And so now that we have a robust header, we should have a design. We should have this design, and we should never have to design a header again, ever, ever. Likely, we will tweak it, we will edit it, we will add to it, we will make variations, but the heavy lifting should generally be done. Now, some of you have already seen either here yesterday or on your own. I'm really thrilled, I'm excited, and honored to have worked with Envision to make a series with 2 of my super friends, Josh Clark and Brad Frost, about design systems. And last week, we just released the second of 6 videos on different topics about design systems. Over the last 5 years or so, we've worked with about a little bit over 24 companies to help them either start a design system or level up the current design system. And here's one thing that we're fond of saying. We say this to every company that we work with. Here's Josh, he's going to say it.
I think the most exciting design systems are boring. And I don't mean that they create boring products. I mean that they are composed of all of the boring components that we've all built 1,000 times.
What we found is about 80% of the work that our product teams are doing could be covered by the components in a design system. Right? This is not science. This is not statistically relevant. This is just a rough guess, a rough estimate. But if you do 3, 5, 10 pilots, you should have a great set of robust, boring, mundane components, the ones that you are all glad to not make again, that you can use to make about 80% of what you need to make. We almost never go into our clients and say, if you have a design system, you'll be able to build every product that you need end to end. It's a nice dream. Never actually found that to be realistic. So what about this 20% here on the right? What's that? Well, designers, this remaining 20%, this is why we don't have to be scared of design systems. The first 80%, that's the price that we pay, right? We accept that no one will ever again in this organization need us to design a button, to design a form, or a table, or a card, ever. And that's scary, because that's the stuff that we do a lot. But what it also means, though, what we get by paying that price, is that we're now not too busy to do that custom data visualization, or that motion graphics piece, or that illustration, or that icon set, or better documentation, or whatever the thing is that has not come up yet because you were too busy, but you would have been perfect to solve this. A couple years ago, we worked with About.com, and we helped them transition to a new company, Dotdash, which they turned into an umbrella publisher. They took all of the content that lived under the current About.com domain, which is essentially just a big portal, and we helped them distribute it to different specific subject matter related sites. So all of the health content that previously lived at About.com/health became its own health site, so did finance, so did home and food, etc. Now, if we had a vanilla design system with some standard components, or even if we had started with Bootstrap, for example, we could have spun up something really quickly. We need to make an article. Here's the article, right? This is the article on multiple sclerosis. Now, technically, there's nothing wrong with this. But I think there's also nothing right with this either. Right? In terms of building quickly, sure, mission accomplished, got a nice set of components, got a grid, got all that, it's responsive. But what we knew is the site where people are going to go to when they first found out that they or a loved one was diagnosed with an illness, maybe a terminal illness, we thought it'd be worthwhile to come up with an expression that better catered to that. So this is what we came up with instead. Same content. We did really simple illustrations for the top set of topics to make people feel like they're in the right place, but also the bedside manner of this page is not as cold as a vanilla web theme. Right? And where a designer would normally take a few days or weeks to design this as a custom page, which may be too long, right? And so the project might get killed because it would take too long. A good design system can help make this work better by distributing the effort. Right? A good design system means a developer could take care of all the parts in red here, essentially 80% of the page. So the designer could focus just on that last 20%. I'm just going to do the illustration. Developer, you've got a good design system. Can you take care of all the other stuff? You've got subnavs, you've got headings, you've got article wells, you've got ads, you've got heroes, you've got navigation, you've got header. Can you take care of that? And I'll do this piece in the middle. This is what Kim in her talk yesterday, she called distinctiveness. I love that. Distinctiveness. It's so important. In the Q&A yesterday, Nathan asked Jennifer, what happens if you don't have an in-house illustration team? Right? What do you do there? Her answer was perfect. She said, sometimes you just need custom work. Right? Sometimes the job of the design system is to take care of everything else so that you can spend time on the stuff that doesn't scale, because now it doesn't need to. This morning, Hamish and Jesse mentioned it too, in a more general sense. Right? Jesse said, just because it's highly functional doesn't mean it has to look ugly. Right? And that's part of our fear about design systems. Well, I guess it's all just going to look vanilla, right? It's all just going to be components all the way down. Other times, it has nothing to do with design at all, lowercase or capital. I did some work last year with a fintech startup, and they asked me to coach their teams to help them be more collaborative, the designers and developers. And in particular, they thought the designer's work wasn't really up to snuff. They were looking at the designer's work and just like, it's just not great. We're not sure why it's not great. Could you come and audit and see what's happening? Now, they don't have a head of design. So the head of engineering has been standing in as the head of design to get the designers moving, right? You see where this is going. So I asked the head of engineering, what do you think the root of this problem is? And he said, listen, we're on a tight deadline. We got to ship this product. We don't have a lot of time to explore. We just have to execute. The designers just need to execute. That's it. So I asked the designers. I did this separately. Designers, what do you think that the root of the problem might be, the two designers that work there? And they said, listen, we're just taking orders. We're just designing whatever everybody else tells us to do. I'm like, well, you don't have any opinions about what it could be? Yeah, we do, but nobody listens to us anyway, so we're just resigned. We'll just do whatever everybody else said. How do you fix this scenario? There's an amazing book called Drive by Daniel Pink. And in this book, he describes a framework for what drives people, get it, what motivates them. Right? He says, here's a framework for how to get your team's amped. So the first thing that drives people is autonomy, right? The desire to direct our own lives. We all want that in some respect. The second thing that he says drives people is mastery, the urge to make progress and get better at something that matters. And then the third thing, the P, is purpose, right? The yearning to do what we do in service of something larger than ourselves. Now, the designers at this startup, they had none of these three, right? It wasn't surprising that they didn't feel driven or motivated. People were telling them what to design, so they had no autonomy. They couldn't direct their lives. They were being managed by someone who didn't know their skills, so they had little idea for how to make progress. The startup was in financial services, and when I asked them, I said, do you all care about financial services? They're like, nah, not really. There's not a lot of purpose in it for them either. Right? So what do? Well, we tried to carve out some space to practice at least one of these. So what I had the designers do was, okay, let's do 2 weeks of design work. Just crank out all the stuff that the engineers need. You at least get 2 weeks of buffer time. So the engineers had their hand full for at least 2 weeks. Now that the designers had free time, we looked for these autonomous spaces for them to practice some mastery. Right? So one of the designers was like, we're making this financial app. It just feels really cold. I'd like to see how we could warm it up. And I don't know if that's illustrations or the color palette or what, but I'd like to explore that. I'm like, cool, you go do that for a week. The other designer, she was really bummed that she didn't get a chance to spend time on writing good documentation for the stuff that she's handing over. She's like, I'd love to be able to annotate the stuff that I'm doing, kind of describe my thoughts and write them down. I just never had time before. I'm like, cool, you do that. And so that went really well, right? They saw how well it was going, and the head of engineering said, all right, well, I mean, this seems to be going well. The work seems to be improving. So he committed to letting them keep some autonomous space where they got to rule their own domains, right? And what does this have to do with design systems? Well, nothing in particular, but also kind of everything, right? The job of a design system is to take care of all the mundane stuff so that everybody on the team can have some autonomy, some mastery, some purpose. Nathan described it this morning in kind of his recap of yesterday and his setup for today. He said sometimes a design system itself is a threat on people's autonomy, right? So it's no surprise that some designers don't want it because then they lose the autonomy. If you have people on your team that don't have any of these three, beware, they may be on their way out, right? The only other major reason to stay is money. And if money is the only reason that you're sticking around, I bet you're not getting the best work out of those people. Right? The common narrative for design systems, for the benefits of design system, when we talk about this as an industry, the language that we use are, oh, it's an efficiency creator, right? We get a lot of efficiency out of a design system, which is true. We get a lot of consistency from a design system, from having a design system. That's also true. But the one that we talk about less is that it's a reliever, right? That's probably the one that's most compelling to me, and that's the one that I try to sell all my teams on, is if your job sucks because you're stuck doing monotonous things, a design system is your way out. That's your ticket. Put all the boring stuff in that, and it'll free you up to do all of the stuff that you want to do. I realized something yesterday sitting in the audience. Now, I wasn't able to attend the two previous Clarity conferences. I had major FOMO seeing all the tweets while it happened, so I watched all the talks afterward. And the first Clarity seemed to be about just kind of getting our heads around this space, like establishing the community, creating shared vocabulary, kind of understanding together, what do we think this is as a community? And then the second Clarity seemed to be about, okay, we know what this is, but how do we do it, and how do we do it well, right? The kind of the nuts and bolts stuff, let's talk about how we do this. And so I've been thinking over the last day, I've just been loving this conference. I've been thinking about, well, what's this one? What is this one? If you've been doing this work long enough, about every 10 years, we get in this spot again, right? 2008, 2009, we were saying the same thing about responsive design, right? First of all, well, what is it? How do we do it? And then once we get our heads around that, well, how do we do it well? And we started talking about topics like mobile first and performance and things like that. And 10 years before that, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2002, we were saying the same thing about CSS. What is it? How do we use it for more than just blogs? Right? And after that, the CSS Zen Garden came along, and the browser wars happened, and we figured all that stuff out. So I think about the advent of CSS and responsive design and where those are now, and I think about what the third chapter of those were, and I'm trying to see, like, well, how does that apply to what we're doing here? Now, Amelie, in her talk just now, she wisely pointed out people don't name movements in the middle of them, so I'm not going to be so foolish as to try to name the movement that we're in. Instead, I'm going to say what I think we're doing now. I don't know what it's all going to kind of wrap up to. But I think what we're doing now, and what has me so excited, is that I think we're talking about fluency now, and beyond that fluency with design systems, right? CSS, that's just how we do things now. We don't talk about what it is as much. We don't talk about how to do it as much. There's still some of that goes on, mostly to teach now, right? Not for us to figure it out. Responsive design, that's just how we do things now. And maybe to a little lesser degree, design systems, that's just how we do things now. Right? The things that we've heard on the stage yesterday, today, animation, illustration, expressiveness, empathy, those are not foundational topics. Those are things that you have to build on top of a foundation. And we wouldn't build on top of a shaky foundation. So this thing must be here to stay. Right? I started this talk by saying designers are scared. Is automation going to take our jobs? Well, honestly, it seems likely. But you know what? I'm good with that, as long as it just takes the boring parts. If I never design a button again, or a form, or a table, I'm good with that too. Just like getting past the early days of CSS and responsive design helps me get back to my real work, I think that's where we are with design systems too. Take all the boring stuff away so that I can get back to figuring out how to make a really complex interface a little bit simpler, or how I can obsess over the level of polish on a homepage animation, or how to manage my teams better, right? The real work. As a designer, I relish the fact that design systems help me practice both uppercase design and lowercase d design, and really just take away the grunt work. If that's where we truly are, I'm really excited, and I'm looking forward to what we're all going to do between now and the next Clarity conference. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Dan. First, You, about 80% of the way into your talk, said design systems are for the mundane things. But my gosh, that was fun. How can we make design systems more fun for us and for them?
I think part of it has to do with our attitudes, honestly. You know, a lot of people, if you go into a design system work or design system work thinking like, this is going to suck, well, yeah, it's probably going to suck. If you go into it thinking, where are all the nooks and crannies of this thing? Right? I think part of what we do as designers, part of what we come with, our superpowers, and I include everybody in this room as designers in that sense, capital D design, is that we're curious, right? We peek under the rug, we look, what's behind there? And if we approach design systems with that attitude, going, how can I make this a little bit better? This is broken, I want to fix this. If we can come at design systems with that attitude, I think that's the stuff that makes this whole job fun.
In your analysis of all those components and the dot matrix that you had, did you find more in-depth learning around the composability of components, like this component's used there, and whether or not that informs what we do? And did you find any patterns and collections of components? Like, what other higher-level learnings did you have out of that exercise?
So I actually found the opposite, which is that I found very little of, here's how you put them together, here's how you use them. And I'm not sure what I think about that. I'm not sure what conclusion I have from that. I think in one sense, that would be helpful guidance, right? Just having the parts. You know, there's a reason that Lego kits today come with instructions, like here's how you make the robot. And I know that a lot of us kind of reject that notion because we didn't have that growing up. But for my kids, it's really fun. Where like sometimes they just don't want to stare at a kit of parts and then figure out on their own how to make it together, how to make it individually. They go, I want to just make the robot. I just want to follow some instructions and make something really great. So I think on one hand, that's part of it. On the other hand, I think that what that also means, or what it could mean, is that that's the job that we have. As designers, we're left to do that. We'll give you the kit of parts. It's up to you, designers, developers, product people, to figure out what interesting combinations exist with the combination of this. If it was too prescriptive, then all we would do is the best that we could do is all the design system has to offer. If there's not that guidance, we're sort of left to our own knowledge and our own experience to figure out, oh, but if I put it together in this way, we hadn't anticipated that, but that actually leads to a surprising result.
In your pilots that you form, you had a scorecard that had criteria that helps you select the right things. And that selection process is really important. You have to figure out the right people to include and so on. But it's also, just like you said, it's a structure. And have you ever found that that structure yielded the wrong pilots, or that by the end of it you realized that the pilots you selected took you in the wrong direction?
Yeah, many times. I think what's important about that process is it's more a process of consensus than it is a process of did we choose the right one? Because what tends to happen in a lot of organizations, and I believe this about design, is that when people believe that design is subjective, then it really just means the most powerful person in the room gets to do what they want. If we can make it objective, and that's a great thing about a scorecard, is it makes it objective. It goes, listen, I didn't pick the numbers, right? We did this on a scale together. We just agreed on the scale. And so now, even if we picked the wrong pilot, at least we were together on that. And I find the benefit of that tends to outweigh like, oh, we shouldn't have done that, the checkout interface, right? We should have done a different pilot for a different reason. But at least we were all together on it. And I find that that's probably a bigger problem that's worth solving. So sometimes being together on the wrong thing is better than being separate on the right thing.
At the DS conference in Helsinki this past March, Kari from Airbnb, the DLS system that they worked on, talked about this notion of coverage, which is very, very similar to the 80% that you talked about. And that the 80% is covered by the design system, freeing up the teams using the design system to work on their own bespoke custom things. Does the design system have a role at all in the 20%? And if so, beyond the components that don't exist for that 20%, what role do we play?
Yeah, I think that's a tough question to answer. I think that part of a designer's role, and not even a designer, anybody who uses the design system, by nature of what a design system is, it's the conglomeration of all the disciplines. It's some code, it's some design, it's some product knowledge, it's some writing. And what that means is I think everybody on the team has to approach it with some humility to be able to say, well, there's part of this that I don't know. There's a part of this that I'm not an expert at. And so if that's the case, I think that the last 20%, you can come at that 20% going like, I don't know, maybe there is something in this design system that I can use, even if it's the shape of a button. Right? I'm not going to use the text in the button, but I can actually use the shape for something. Right? I think it's assuming positive intent that the people, I forget who said it, either today or yesterday, but someone on the stage said, like, it's sort of assuming that that all the people that contributed to it did a good job. That there was something that they did that was worth putting in the design system. So if you approach a design system that way and you go, everything in here is good because everybody in here did a good job, there's probably something I can learn from it. There's probably something under some corner where I go, oh, I could use that, and I never thought that this would be in there. So I think that if you approach it with some humility, I think it'll get you a lot of runway in that 20%. Even if you're doing it from scratch, you can at least be inspired by what's already in the design system.
I have a lot of hard eyes for the Atlassian design guidelines and Atlas Kit that they have too. And I really appreciated your words on how their words weren't necessarily tailored for the designers, things like yarn and NPM and all of those other words that you highlighted on their screen. But it also makes me think about, and I'm going to take this to Philadelphia, Rocky once said, if I can change and you can change, we can all change. And so what role, come on, it's Rocky. Love Rocky.
Yo, Adrian.
So how much do designers also need to change or learn or take steps towards that language? And is there a place for that language to be a place they both coexist?
Oh, so much. I mean, Sharon mentioned it in the first talk. She talked about empathy. I think that the more siloed we are, the worse our products get. And so I think that designers and developers and product folks and writers, the more we can say, I'm willing to learn a little bit about what you do. As a designer, we talked about this a little bit too, that the gateway drug for designers into design systems are often tokens. And tokens exist in code mostly, right? I got to write a little bit of JSON. I got to write a little bit of XML. I got to write a little bit of YAML. That's normally out of a designer's purview. But for a designer to have some humility and say, all right, I'll learn a little bit of code. And for a developer to say, well, I'll do a little bit of this design work, that brings us all closer together. So I think that's a huge part of it. And the more that we do that, I think that not only are our design systems going to get better, which I think is not the point, our products are going to get better, which leads to the point, which is that people are going to use this stuff. Like, it's going to be easier for them. It's going to be easier for the person who's taking medicine to use the product and know what medicine they're going to take. It becomes easier for the person that's trying to pay their water bill. Like, that's the important stuff. And we get so stuck in the but this button is not the proper rounded radius. Like, it's such a shallow viewpoint. And I think if we approach it with that humility and approach it in a way where we're talking about and thinking about, well, if I just learned a little bit more, I could make this better for the user. I can make this better for people. If I just did a little bit, something that's a little bit out of my swim lane, I can make this a lot better for the person using this. I think that, man, I wish more teams worked like that.
You spent the arc of your story talking about what designers need to be worried about or how they have worries and feel threatened. How about to this audience, to me, to even yourself, what are you worried about and how do you need to translate those worries into potential change in the next few years?
I'm worried about me. I'm worried about how do I get mine? Right? I think that's something that all of us feel in some respect. It's like, well, if nobody's looking out for me, I got to look out for me. And I think that one of the things that I try to encourage in teams and also try to work hard on myself is, instead of worrying about me, could I look out for you instead? Because if I look out for you, then maybe you are more likely to look out for me. But if I'm just worried about me, then you're going to worry about you. And so in both scenarios, we're both being taken care of, but in a weird way in the second one. So what am I worried about? I'm worried that I will just worry about me. I'm worried that I will just think about, well, I designed what I wanted to design. Good luck to you all. I'm going on vacation. That's what got us here in the first place. So I think that ego and hubris and arrogance is a big part of this. And that's why I sort of counter that with humility as an ingredient in design systems for the people. Is if we all have humility, we're more willing to put ourselves out for somebody else. Related to this is the Google study that came out of 2013 or 2014, Project Aristotle, where the thing that made the most successful teams was psychological safety on teams. That's not a coincidence. Right? Teams where people felt like they could try something and they're not going to get fired, or that their coworkers had their back. You don't have to be best friends. You don't have to hang out outside of work. But inside of work, knowing that somebody else is there to go, don't worry, there's going to be no consequence of that. I feel like that's what makes work fun, and that's what makes for good teams that make good products.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, everyone.